Okay. All right. Hello and welcome to the fifth in our series of AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships chat sessions. My name is Sage Russell. I'm Associate Director of the S&T Policy Fellowships, and I will be moderating today's session. These chat sessions are a six-part series, and every month will feature fellows with varied disciplinary backgrounds to showcase the diversity of backgrounds, disciplines, and career stages represented in the fellowships. This is your opportunity to hear from fellows and ask any questions you may have about the fellowship experience and application process. In today's chat, we'll hear from mid-career fellows with backgrounds in academia with a specific focus on opportunities in the judicial branch program area. Joining me today will be alumnus fellow Dr. Shubha Ghosh and current fellow Dr. Nancy Martin. Also joining us today is Joe Cecil from the Federal Judicial Center, which is actually the host agency for the Judicial Branch Fellowship. Shuba and Nancy will be discussing their experiences as S&T Policy Fellows and the opportunities for career enhancement that it provides to mid-career applicants. Joe will be providing insight into the role of a Judicial Branch Fellow at the FJC. So let me start by introducing, I will introduce Nancy first. Shuba hasn't joined us yet, but hopefully will be here soon. Nancy is a 2014-16 AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow at the U.S. Agency for International Development in the Office of Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment, where her work focuses on the USAID implementation of the U.S. strategy to prevent and respond to gender-based violence globally. She is a sociologist with a management and engineering background. She is currently on leave from the Sociology Department at California State University, Long Beach, where she teaches statistics, research methods, the sociology of gender, and a seminar on religion and social change. And Shubha Ghosh was our very first AAAS Judicial Branch Fellow, and he served his fellowship at the Federal Judicial Center. And at the FJC, he built on his specialties in intellectual property and economic analysis of legal policy. His work focused on investigating current policy issues confronting federal courts in addressing patent litigation. Shuba's work builds on his extensive writings in intellectual property law and policy, particularly on the role of patent law in promoting innovation and competitiveness. Since 2008, he has been the Vilas Research Fellow and Professor of Law at the University of Wisconsin, where he currently teaches intellectual property, transactional intellectual property seminar, and rotates among patent, copyright, and international intellectual property business organizations, antitrust law, and economics and torts. Joe Cecil is he is a senior research associate in the research division of the Federal Judicial Center, and he will talk a little bit more about his background when we turn over to him. So the judicial branch opportunity is part of the suite of AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships. We divide our program into 6 program areas, and all of the program areas have essentially the same eligibility requirements, which is a PhD in a scientific discipline, natural, physical, or social sciences, or an engineering degree at least the master's level, plus 3 years of experience. And fellows cannot already be federal employees and must be U.S. citizens. The eligibility requirement for the Judicial Branch Fellowship has another requirement on top of the ones I already mentioned, in that Judicial Branch Fellows must have 3 years of professional experience related to the theme of the program area, in addition to their qualifying degree. So, as I've said, the Judicial Branch Fellowship does require additional experience, which is one of the reasons it's ideal for mid-career and faculty candidates. And it's one of our newest program areas. It launched last year in 2014, and we are currently seeking a Judicial Branch Fellow for the 2016-17 year. It is a one-year fellowship, and I will turn it over to Joe to talk a little bit about the Federal Judicial Center itself and the kind of experiences that AAAS fellows serving at the Federal Judicial Center can look forward to.
Thank you, Sage. We're delighted to have the opportunity to have a AAAS fellow at the Federal Judicial Center. It's something that certainly worked out well for us during Shuba's tenure. As Sage mentioned, it's unusual because this fellowship is within the judicial branch, not the executive or the legislative branch. And the Federal Judicial Center is an agency within the judicial branch, a fairly small agency, but it has a very distinctive purpose. The Federal Judicial Center does research and education programs for the federal courts. I'm in the research division, and many of our projects involve looking at the way the federal court rules work. We look at sentencing guideline issues. We look at alternative dispute resolution. And many times the work that we're doing builds into the educational programs that are then prepared for judges, public defenders, and court personnel. So in that sense, it's a small agency. It's an agency that has a very distinctive purpose. Would you want to hear more about the agency, or where shall we go with this? Can you hear? Sage, can you hear me?
She's having
go ahead, Nancy.
difficulties, but I would like you to go ahead with some more information on the agency.
Oh, sure.
Her audio is not working.
The agency is unusual in the sense that, as I said, it's very small. We have a professional staff of about 20. Most of our staff members do have PhDs, typically in areas of social science, like political science, psychology, statistics, or sociology. Quite often, the staff is trained in methodology and applied research design. And it's that experience that I think is most valuable in terms of the work that we do. It's not necessary to have a law degree to work at the Federal Judicial Center. About 6 of us have law degrees, but many of those staff members also have PhDs. So it's the PhD, it's the science component that's important. And if you've heard about the Federal Judicial Center at all, you've probably heard about it in terms of the Reference Manual for Scientific Evidence. This is a resource that we prepared with the National Academy of Science that's intended to give judges information they need to understand complex science issues that may arise in the context of evidence in federal court cases. And the Reference Manual on Scientific Evidence is is a primer in terms of making the judges available, or making the information available to judges. That makes sure information is available to judges when they deal with these complex issues. It's intended only to give judges enough information so they can have an informed conversation with the experts and with the attorneys. So that's probably our distinctive science contribution that perhaps many scientists are aware of.
I'll just chime in. As a AAAS fellow myself, one of my professional development goals was, it was interesting to hear about the research side in your office. Because one of my professional development goals in applying for the fellowship was to expand my knowledge of applied research rather than the academic knowledge for knowledge's sake. And so I think that's one of the really extraordinary aspects of the fellowship opportunity, is that the research, the analysis, anything that we're doing in our individual placements are most likely to be put directly into someone's hands who is making decisions in real time about the kinds of real issues that we care about. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's really one of the most satisfying parts of my job. I conduct research studies often for the rules committees of the Judicial Conference, the governing body of the third branch, and then have the opportunity to attend those rule committee meetings and actually see the judges consider that evidence and weigh the evidence in the context of the policy decisions that the Judicial Conference is making. They don't always make the kind of decision that I would make, but nonetheless, it's been very satisfying to watch that information being given serious consideration and occasionally maybe even direct the way the courts have decided to develop policies in certain areas. Also, I've got to tell you, it's just fun to schmooze with judges. They're fascinating people. They've all got great stories. They do very important work, and I've felt that being able to chat with judges is one of the most satisfying parts of the job.
That's neat.
That's great. All right. So thank you very much for talking a little bit about the Federal Judicial Center. Can you describe what Shuba's role was to a certain extent while he was there?
Absolutely. I'm sorry Shuba's not able to join us. Very distinguished scholar. Shuba has a PhD in economics as well as a law degree as a law professor at Wisconsin. But let me tell you, we were much more interested in his PhD in economics than we were in the law degree. We see all kinds of lawyers, but we need someone who can come in and help us structure a research program that will start providing judges with the kind of empirical information they need in these areas. So Shuba, because he had the background in economics and the empirical research in economics, was able to come into our office on a one-year program and look at what is an emerging problem in the federal courts, and that's the problem of fee shifting in patent litigation cases. About 4 months before Shuba started his internship, or his fellowship, the Supreme Court decided a case that encourages judges to do more fee shifting in patent litigation. And Shuba, it turns out, was interested in the topic, and it worked out very well, I think, for everyone. We were able to plan the research before he came. When he arrived, we were able to start gathering the information he needed. And now Shuba has prepared a publication that not only is useful to the Federal Judicial Center and that will be circulated to federal judges who are dealing with patent litigation, but he's also prepared an academic publication that would be published in a law review and actually will find his more traditional audience. So that's what we're really looking for. We're looking for someone with an interdisciplinary interest, someone who has skills that they're willing to apply to issues of concern to federal judges. And in that sense, Shuba was an excellent candidate. But don't misunderstand, he was an excellent candidate because of his PhD and his knowledge of science. The law degree was nice, but we see that all the time.
Okay. Yes, for candidates who are interested in this particular fellowship, this is the Judicial Branch Fellowship is part of the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship. So we're placing scientists, engineers, and health professionals at the doctoral level who have an interest in law rather than lawyers with an interest in science. Nancy, can you tell us about your professional objectives for undertaking this fellowship?
Absolutely. Well, I mentioned the first one, actually, which is to have the opportunity to expand my knowledge and participate in applied research. And that was one of, or the first of my main goals, professional development goals for the fellowship. The second was I was interested in expanding my thinking, my scholarship, eventually my teaching, to be more international, to be more global than it has been in the past. And my third goal was really about policy, learning more about how policy is made, what goes into it, how social scientists, I'm a social scientist myself, how social science can play a part in the policy making efforts here in DC. And I'm happy to say that this amazing opportunity has given me a chance to pursue all three of those goals and really make a difference, very life-changing.
All right, and did your goals, or have they changed over the course of your fellowship? And do you consider that you're on track to accomplish all of these goals since you've got another year coming up?
My big goals really, they didn't change. The broad kind of goals that I came with, lots of smaller ideas about what it would be like did change along the way, and opportunities that I didn't expect opened up. So there's been changes at that level. But I would say I feel very much on track to accomplish all of those goals. Really, just even in the first year, I've had opportunities in all three of those arenas, and I've been taking this time to reflect. So for example, in the applied research, I've done analysis. My primary role, as you mentioned in the kind introduction, is to support the implementation of a U.S. strategy. So it's a policy document. It's the U.S. strategy to prevent and respond to gender-based violence globally. And it's a whole of government strategy that applies both to my agency, U.S. Agency for International Development, as well as State Department, as well as all federal agencies. And so part of my role is to reflect on, to coordinate the efforts at AID on our work to implement that policy. And I just completed the report on implementation for our agency. It's a report of 3 years of activity, what the agency has been doing, and it's been through a long clearance process through the agency and is hopefully headed to the White House next week, which is exciting. Wow. And so in support of that, I gathered a lot of information, but I also conducted some new analyses that hadn't been done previously on our work. There's lots of existing reporting mechanisms in our agency, and so I was able to gather data from that and conduct analyses. So, really exciting, very real time. What I hope to do with some of my remaining time is learn more on the evaluation of programs out in the field. So I've learned a bit about that and I've been involved, but I'll have some additional opportunities to do that this fall. So yeah, in all three goals, I've had great opportunities, and also I'm looking forward to some additional ways to achieve those goals.
Great. One question that often comes up for faculty members is whether their colleagues are going to be supportive of their department chair, their colleagues, other collaborators. How was this experience for you when you were applying for the AAAS fellowship, Nancy?
Yes, this is a great question, and I would say that my experience was different in year one versus renewing for year two. So for year one, and truthfully, my department, especially my department chair and my dean, had just been enormously supportive. When I explained to them what the opportunity was about, what I envisioned being able to bring back, not just for myself, but for the students, for the college, they were absolutely on board with the opportunity. So I had a great deal of support from my university, from my colleagues. My collaborators, the person I most recently was collaborating or am collaborating with on a new research project is also a good friend. So she was very happy for me as a friend, concerned as a collaborator, but we are working it out. And in fact, I made the decision. It was tough because I would just love to be here for the full year, but in part because of needing to keep that research project moving, I'm returning in the spring to my university. So I did a part-year extension.
Right. Okay, and how do you think your experience as a fellow will be beneficial to you and your work and your university when you return?
There are so many levels at which I'm able to see how this experience is going to contribute to my university when I return. one of the first things I said to a lot of people as I was taking leave and coming out here, that I'm doing what I tell my students to do all the time. I'm an advisor within my department, and so I talk to students about take that internship, go study abroad, do these exciting development opportunities. And so I got to take my own advice at an age where I wouldn't expect to have an opportunity like this. And so as I go back and advise students, I'll have sort of a renewed energy and enthusiasm about what a big deal a professional development opportunity can be. So that's one level. I am excited about taking what I have learned into the classroom in every class I teach. So I teach a lot of statistics, and I have all kinds of new data sets that I'll be bringing to my students to learn about global issues, gender issues specifically. I'm in the Office of Gender Equality, and I'm excited about that. Everything from adding it to my statistics class to starting or developing a new class, hopefully in collaboration with colleagues in international studies at our university and our women's studies department in my college, starting a new class on gender and international development. So that's in my teaching. And of course, in my research and scholarship, this opportunity has opened up connections with people across disciplines, new ideas about research projects, again, the opportunity to get involved in applied research about things that are happening now, doing the kind of evaluation that says, are these programs working? Are these the kind of programs we should be investing in? So just all kinds of levels. I'm very excited about it.
That's great. Let's now take a question that has been submitted from somebody in our audience. And this is from someone, a social worker with a PhD in public health, whose research interests include family preservation while inmates move through the justice system, both federal and state. The questioner does not have a JD and wants to know if there is a place for her in this placement. So I will take this first, and then I'm going to turn over to Joe for some additional comments. Yes, there is absolutely a place for you in the Judicial Branch Fellowship. Your academic interests line up very clearly with the goals of the fellowship, and it sounds like you have background and knowledge in the legal area. My suggestion for anybody applying for this fellowship, actually for any of our fellowships, is to take the opportunity provided by the candidate statement to sketch out where your interests in this particular program area come from, how you hope to use the fellowship to advance your interests, and in this case, what your demonstrated interests are. So talk in your application about what you've already done to this point, and I think that will be just fine. Joe, do you have anything you would like to add?
Yes, I think there is a place for that kind of background and training when it's accompanied by an interest in extending that interdisciplinary approach to the judicial branch. I didn't list everything that the Federal Judicial Center does, but among the things we do is look at various kinds of probation and pretrial program, and we work a lot in those areas. We work in a lot of programs that try to give probation officers a better understanding of what kind of information will be useful, and certainly understanding the consequences of family support structures and how that's likely to affect someone who is serving out that kind of less restrictive sentence is important. You know, over the next several years, the Bureau of Prisons and the probation and pretrial system is going to undergo a tremendous change. Many of the sentences are being reduced, particularly those that involve especially harsh sentences for those with nonviolent drug offenses, and the courts are going to need a lot of guidance about how to deal with all of the new early release candidates that come before them. So yes, I think the answer is there is an important role for that kind of information, and I expect it would be something that would be useful in the criminal justice, probation, and pretrial setting.
Great, thank you. We have another question here, which is about the application, and the question is, how specific should one be in the essay, and how specific, and whether it should that it might lay out an idea that is not feasible or will not be supported. I think there's a balance in the amount of specificity in the candidate statement. Clearly, the selection committees who will be reviewing the application want to have a clear idea of why candidates are pursuing the fellowship and what they hope to gain from it. That said, it is difficult, if not impossible, to get everything one is hoping in a fellowship placement, because the opportunities change from year to year and we don't always know exactly what they'll be. And it's very important for candidates to be flexible. So I think it's important to show what you want to do and how this fits in with your career goals, but to be open to a variety of ways of meeting the goal, not the one particular thing you think you have your heart set on at this point. And I invite Nancy to add her thoughts to that based on her own experience.
Sure, thank you, Sage. I had heard this message about flexibility, and I incorporated that into my application. I also truly felt that way. I was interested in coming to DC. I was interested in this opportunity, and I was open to what the possibilities were. And in fact, as I learned more and more about the fellowship, more and more about the different agencies, I was interested in a variety of different opportunities. So I guess I would say actually two things. One, in addition to, it sounded like the question said proposing an idea that that may not be feasible. I do think it's important to say what your interests are, but I also think it's an application. So it's a little bit, I think you want to think about, and I know I did, what skills can I bring that could be broadly used? So I do have some, part of my background as a sociologist is in gender, and I did talk about that, and I had the good fortune of ending up in a placement in an office that deals with those issues. But actually, I had lots of interesting interviews, and it was much more about a whole variety of skills, the research skills, the analytical. I also had some project management background. So those skills that could be used in all kinds of offices. And I think that's a helpful thing to think about in your application. That was the first part. My second part, just quickly, is from an academic to other academics, have a non-academic look at your application. This is different than an academic application. It's not writing for a grant. Be thinking about what this opportunity is about, and it's about working in federal agencies, in offices that are quite different. And so I spent a lot of time on mine, and it was a really interesting exercise, and I also had other people read it and look at it and give me feedback.
Okay, and Joe, could you talk a little bit about how you work with a AAAS fellow at the FJC to develop their plan?
Absolutely, and I want to build a little bit on the comments that Nancy made about trying to match the interest. You know, that's certainly the critical thing, is trying to find project or projects that are consistent with the interest of the fellow as well as beneficiary to the judicial system. We are open to any proposals, but what is going to be most important to us are the kind of skills and interests that are expressed in the application. Things happen very fast in the judicial branch. Sometimes it's a little hard to take a project and make sure that it both starts and ends in ways that are convenient for the applicant or for the fellow, and also useful for the courts. So there is some structuring and some effort to make sure that everyone's interests are being met. The typical circumstance is that we will find a topic that's of interest, both useful to the courts and of interest to the fellow. We'll talk about how that project should be developed. And all of this takes place before the fellowship starts. When the fellowship starts, we like to have everything sort of set and ready to go. And then over the next 12 months, 9 months to 12 months, typically the fellow will write a report based on empirical research that was done while at the center, and that report will both be published by the Federal Judicial Center, and the fellow will also then take that report and develop it into a more traditional academic publication. It's especially useful when the fellow returns to an academic position and is able to continue working in the same areas. So we view it as very important as part of our obligation to make sure that the fellow has work that is not just useful to us, but that will be beneficial throughout an academic career. One of the other advantages of being someplace like the Federal Judicial Center is you get access to certain kinds of data sets that are not always available to fellows. So typically this is the chance to interview judges, the chance to do surveys of judges, the chance to use some of the internal data sets that have been developed for court administration that aren't openly available to scholars, are some of the more attractive features that I think the fellows would find at the Federal Judicial Center.
Thank you. I have another question here, and this is from someone who is in his second to last year of a PhD program in experimental psychology and wants to know what actions he should take during the remainder of his time in graduate school to best prepare himself for a AAAS policy fellowship. For example, should the individual seek a research-based postdoc position before applying to the fellowship? For somebody with interest in a particular area, such as drug policy, is this a question that AAAS fellows have worked on in the past? So I would like Nancy to speak to this question, and then I can add a couple of words at the end when she's finished.
Well, I think it's not necessary to seek a position before applying to the fellowship. I've certainly met fellows who, of course, you have to have your PhD complete before the application deadline. So I think you could also apply directly. Of course, it's always helpful to have more work experience. So I think that's a reasonable avenue as well. And I would just suggest, in terms of thinking about preparing, is to do what you're doing now in joining a video chat, learning about AAAS. There's a wealth of information on the web, and if you know any former fellows, alumni fellows that you can reach out to learn more about it from them, I think that's helpful as well.
Okay, and let me just add, as Nancy said, and as it is the PhD or the Master's in Engineering with 3 years of experience that is the requirement for the fellowship. There is no requirement for candidates to have done a postdoctoral position. That said, for candidates who know that they are interested in an academic career or think they may be interested in an academic career, oftentimes it is helpful to do a postdoc and fully qualify yourself according to the requirements of your discipline should you want to move on to an academic career or after the fellowship. So that is really an individual decision, and it's based on your own assessment of your career goals. It is not a requirement for the fellowship itself, and it doesn't affect your candidacy for the AAAS fellowship. So, all right, I have another question here from somebody who, with a PhD in biofuels, currently doing a postdoc, wants to know what the benefit would be of pursuing a fellowship in the science diplomacy area. So, Nancy, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. To me, this is this is an extraordinary opportunity to learn about policy, to evaluate your background and interests. I know for me, I felt confident that I was completing this as a professional development experience. Although I did keep an open mind about careers and different possibilities. But for many people, it's a time to investigate different kinds of career paths. And so the opportunity to do that in a very structured way, I think, is just a great opportunity for anyone with a PhD who has an open mind to possibilities other than a strict academic career.
Yeah, and let me just add that diplomacy, security, and development is one of our program areas, but we have others as well, including a program area in energy, environment, and agriculture that might be very applicable and of great interest for somebody pursuing a PhD in biofuels. We have quite a few placements at the Department of Energy. In addition, we live in a world that is getting smaller all the time, so in our more internationally focused assignments, there is a wide variety of opportunities for candidates with a whole array of disciplines, including many in the energy field. Similarly, in placement areas that are domestically, agencies that are more domestically focused, they all have international offices. They're collaborating with their counterparts overseas. So there are many opportunities for an international dimension to the assignment, whether you're at an agency like the State Department or whether you're at the Department of Energy. And since we're focusing on the judicial branch in this session, if you have anything you'd like to add, Joe, about somebody with an energy background, please do so.
I don't know of a specific application for an energy background, but certainly the regulation of the energy area and the role of the courts in trying to understand that complex area and pattern of regulation would be a topic that I think would have a lot of traction. Also, I should mention that the Federal Judicial Center does a lot of international judicial education work and some international judicial research. And in that context, we spend a lot of time trying to find ways that the federal courts can harmonize their kind of court structure with the structures and guidance offered by many other countries. And certainly the international approaches to various kinds of problems and how those solutions have come about has become an increasingly important part of the Federal Judicial Center in recent years. And one of the things we've learned, for example, is that the judicial innovations that take place are very much embedded in the cultures and values of those judicial systems. And it's a little hard simply to extract a novel, even a successful program, and drop it in place without a good deal of adaptation taking place. So we are learning a lot more about how that international perspective can be adapted to the federal court system and how to provide information from our court system that's useful to others.
Thank you.
Could I just add as well, Sage? I know less on the State Department side, but I really should have said that at AID, at Agency for International Development, there's an enormous amount of energy work going on. Just last week, I was on a panel in a conference at the Millennium Challenge Corporation that was a gender and energy conference, and it was the response was so great they had to close registration. So there's just a lot of innovative and interesting things happening in the energy field as it intersects with international development. So I think AID is a great place for that.
Yeah, the specific question had to do with energy, but you could make it any topic, and you will find that there are international dimensions to the topic in the internationally focused agencies, and then there are, in the mission agencies, there's an international component as well. I will also add, since Nancy brought it up, that the Millennium Challenge Corporation is now a host agency for the AAAS fellowships. We have our very first fellows at the MCC starting this September, so which is very exciting for us. I'm going to turn to a question that was submitted ahead of time. And this questioner says, I have the impression that the research and exchange of information that one conducts as a fellow is fast-paced. So is that accurate? And if so, do fellows experience a sense of conflict between the thoroughness and detail-oriented work that the practice of science entails and the rapid assessments that the fellowship involves? So this is a question that comes up in the context of the AAAS fellowship in the policy world all the time. And I would ask Nancy to speak to it from her experience in academia and as a AAAS fellow.
Well, I was chuckling as you asked the question because there is a short and very emphatic answer. Yes. It is a very different world. And yes, on a serious note, yes, at times it can be stressful in that I'm very interested in taking the time and doing the analysis, and generally speaking, things are on the move. There's deadlines, there's hard deadlines, and folks are expecting that either I'm reviewing something and they want answers, or even the analysis that I mentioned earlier. I feel very good about it. At the same time, it's 30% of what I would have liked to do if I were an academic and I was just managing the project to my own timeline and to my own plans. But we had a deadline, and so I did the portion of it that it was possible to do with other competing priorities and so on. So yes, things are moving at a fast pace. There's regularly emails that say, clearance by Friday or flash clearance by today at noon, and so it is a much different world. Sometimes I do miss the autonomy of looking at what needs to be done and setting out a project myself. Uh-oh. Are you able to hear me? Because I've lost my screen.
We can hear you, Nancy.
I can hear you.
Okay. I don't know what happened on my end, but it looked like things shut down. So I will just say sometimes I've missed the autonomy of being able to create my own schedule of what it would take to complete a project. But at the same time, it can be exciting and interesting, and yeah, it is a different world. That's part of why I took advantage of this opportunity. So.
Can I add to that?
Right. Yes, of course.
Yes, there is a tension. There will always be a tension because the deadlines are being set by typically external events, and the challenge is to do a high-quality research job within those constraints. And sometimes that means you don't have the time to gather the information you would want, but because the policy actions are likely to be based on the research, we spend a great deal of time trying to make sure the quality of the research is as high as possible. We do double coding, we do verifications and cross-checks, and that will always be a tension in this kind of research. So one thing that I think you may miss is sort of the more leisurely or self-appointed schedule. But you get the satisfaction, and the trade-off is that you get to see someone actually sit down and use your work in a way to develop policy. So I think that's one of the advantages. Let me mention another advantage in ways that these jobs differ from traditional academic jobs, and I'm going to talk about the Federal Judicial Center itself right now. When I was in an academic job, some of the individuals who most clearly shared my interest were all the way across the country. And it was quite often that the person down the hall was working in a completely different area. One of the satisfactions that we've had at the Federal Judicial Center is that right there on that single floor of the building, are a number of people who share a common interest in the way the courts are functioning, the way the courts are perhaps dysfunctional in some ways. And it's not hard to find someone who shares that interest. You can just walk down the hall, and chances are someone has at least thought about that topic, if not done work on the topic. And that makes for a very collegial atmosphere. It makes for a very supportive atmosphere. And it's something that those of us who've been at the center for a while really cherish. And I think it makes working at a place like the Federal Judicial Center a very special experience. I'm sorry, Shuba's not here to
Yeah. Thank you both. I have another question that's come in from the audience, and the questioner is asking, since there is one judicial fellowship opportunity, should an applicant apply to other of our program tracks in case the individual is not chosen for the Judicial Branch Fellowship? So let me speak to that first, and that is there is only one Judicial Branch placement at this point. We hope at some point there will be more. But I absolutely, if it's the one that appeals to you the most, you should absolutely apply for it. We will award it to somebody. Somebody's going to get that fellowship assignment, we hope. But we do encourage candidates to apply to more than one fellowship area. We have, in addition to the Judicial Branch Fellowship, we have congressional fellowships. AAAS sponsors 2 of them. So again, that's another area where the number of placements are a little more limited. But in our in our executive branch program areas, we have multiple opportunities in diplomacy, security, and development, in health, education, and human services, in energy, environment, and agriculture, and also in big data and analytics. There are multiple opportunities. So I encourage people always to apply to as many fellowship areas, up to 2, as they have an interest, but absolutely apply to the one that appeals to you the most. Would either Joe or Nancy like to add anything to that? No.
We hope that in the future there will be more judicial fellows. It's a program that we've found very useful. I should mention that although last year was the first time we've had a AAAS Judicial Fellow, we have for about 30 years had Supreme Court Fellows. That's a somewhat similar program to the White House Fellowship Program. And so we do have some experience in how to develop these programs and kind of make them work. And my hope is that in the future we can expand this.
Yes, we do as well, and we're working on it. But starting with one and hopefully building from there. I would ask you, for those of you in the audience, to please take a moment to respond to our chat survey when it comes up in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Your feedback is very important, and it will help us plan future chat events. So I'm going to move on to another question that was submitted ahead of time, and that is, what are the obstacles for somebody in their mid-50s, say, to transition into a career in science policy? So I will start with Nancy, from your own experience or from other fellows you know, and then we'll ask Joe to add some comments.
Well, for starters, my first thought is that the obstacles might be more in one's own mind, because there really is an opportunity here to learn, to grow, to make a transition, if that's the direction that you want to go. I'm an older fellow, and at the same time, I felt like one of the things I really enjoyed about the orientation was that the fellowship cohort, if you will, was enormously diverse. It was diverse in many ways, including age. So for me, I felt like it was not an obstacle at all to do this. And in some ways, as a mid-career person, that brings with it a certain amount of, added legitimacy. And in my placement, I was had wonderful opportunities, being given a whole lot of responsibility, which gave me then lots of opportunities to grow. So for me, it was less about obstacles. Occasionally, I have a couple of friends. I grew up in this area, but haven't lived back here for lots of years. So I had dinner with high school friends the other night who are all in federal agencies. And they were chatting about retirement. And I'm just thinking about doing new things with my career. So, you can have differences in ideas with your peers, but I haven't really seen obstacles. I do suggest that to not emphasize the fact that you feel like you're older. Just you're at a place where you've learned a lot and you're growing and you're interested in learning new things and doing new things. So.
Yep. Joe, any thoughts on transitioning into new areas later on in one's career?
Right. I'm certainly aware of no institutional impediments to that practice. As Nancy mentioned, it's typically more personal issues rather than professional issues that I've seen. And we've had a number of individuals who have moved into judicial policy positions, not so much the research positions, but occasionally judicial education positions and some judicial rules policy positions after very successful careers in other areas, either the practice of law or some other form of professional experience. So it's been a very satisfying experience, I think, for them. And I think if you're interested, I think you can make that work. Hey, Shuba.
Great. Yeah, so I am happy to welcome Shubha Ghosh, who we've referred to off and on throughout this chat, to give the audience a chance to meet him in person, so to speak. So I'll turn over the program to Shuba to give a little overview of his fellowship experience at the Federal Judicial Center as our very first judicial branch Science and Policy Fellow. Welcome, Shuba.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry to be late. I think I'm in Central Time, but for some reason I began at 2 p.m. Central Time, but I guess it was 2 p.m. Eastern. So I guess the first lesson is to learn about time zones, or at least be informed about them. But I just completed the Judicial Fellowship, I guess a few weeks ago, maybe about a month ago now. I started a year ago while I was on leave on a sabbatical from the University of Wisconsin Law School, where I teach full-time, and now I'm back there this year. And I thought it was very, very useful in my stage of the career, where I have been in teaching and in scholarship for some time, and it got me to learn more about the FJC, get engaged with science and law policy, at least from a academic perspective, to be in the DC area. I grew up in the DC area, so I go back there fairly often. But it was good to have that connection for that period of time. And power of the precedent. I don't know if I've set any good precedents, but I got a lot of work done, and it's very useful for me to develop a certain line of research and engagement with patent policy, which is something that I work on and I'm very keen on. But I hope to stay involved in terms of shaping the Judicial Fellowship in the future as AAAS tries to recruit more folks and increase the domain. So whatever help I can provide would be helpful, would be useful to me, and I'd be very interested in doing that.
Great. Let me ask both Shuba and Nancy for some thoughts on some of the actions you might have taken in hindsight to prepare for the AAAS fellowship. Nancy?
Well, I had the good fortune to know someone who was currently in the fellowship, and so she was kind enough to chat with me on the phone several times, look at my application, share her materials that she had sent for her application, and that was invaluable. So that was a really useful thing. And then I think this is about preparing for the fellowship. The other thing I would do, I had the summer before I started an incredibly busy summer with my prior work for a variety of reasons. And if I were to do it over again, I would have spent the summer studying and learning about the agency and where I was headed. It still worked out wonderfully, but there's a lot of, most agencies have all kinds of information that is publicly available before you're employed, and so that would be a recommendation to somebody who's just starting in a new fellowship.
All right. Shuba, what do you wish, if you'd known then what you know now, how would you have prepared for the fellowship?
Well, I did try to prepare fairly early on. As the applicants may know, it's probably worth knowing that once you get selected, there's sort of an initial orientation or an initial meet and greet in April, and that I attended that. And for the congressional fellows, I think that's, and maybe for the executive fellows, that's part of that is just getting the lay of the land. I already knew sort of the lay of the land going in as a judicial fellow. This is one of the great advantages of the judicial fellowship, that you're going to go to the Federal Judicial Center. So in April, I started doing the initial contacts and tried to think about different projects. I guess maybe what I would do different is try to nail down the project a little bit earlier than I did. You never know, especially when you're just starting out in a new fellowship, exactly what the dynamic would be. But I guess I wish I had maybe done more work over the summer. Not that I felt myself floundering in any way. It's just that it would just have given me broadened the net a little bit in terms of what I could work on. But I'm hoping to keep my connections with the FJC, and I'm finishing up my report and so forth right now based on my work. So I guess underlying it is, I guess if I'd done more work last year, I'd be having more time now to do other things. But I'm enjoying completing the report and thinking about it because it's become very topical in lots of ways. A lot of legislative action is moving forward on patent reform, so it's giving me a fresh perspective to basically look at the work I did and then try to flesh it out right now.
Great, thank you. We're going to continue for a few minutes past the official 3 o'clock stop time because of Shuba's arrival, so we get to hear a little bit more from him. And so in that vein, I'm going to ask you, Shuba, if you can give a specific example of how your work during the fellowship and after, although it's only been a couple weeks since your fellowship year ended, has had an impact on science policy, or in your case, on science policy and law.
Boy, I don't. Hard to say whether there has been an impact. I'm not quite sure things move that fast in D.C. or in the world of policy. But I mean, during the course of the year, it was interesting to give talks locally in the D.C. area. There was a conference at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office that I attended and presented some of my preliminary work on in February of this year. And so it's been useful to make those types of contacts. I'm now working, or I don't know if struggling is the right word, but just sort of thinking about the best way to produce a report that would be helpful for the center. And so that's been interesting to see, and I'll be going back and forth with Joe in the next couple of weeks to see how the research can be summarized and then hopefully be used for the benefit of policy. But maybe I misunderstood your question, Sage, but I think it would be presumptuous to think that it maybe have had any impact yet.
Yeah.
Joe,
do you want to speak to that?
Shuba and I have not had a chance to speak recently. We've both been traveling. So Shuba may not know this, but the director of the Federal Judicial Center, Judge Fogel, is very interested in patent litigation. He's from the Northern District of California that does a lot of patent litigation. And he was asking us just the other day, where is that report from Shuba? Because he wants to use that report as part of our education training programs for the patent continuing education programs. So I think one of the things that we're going to see is this report beginning to shape the way we are educating federal judges about what considerations they should keep in mind when they're faced with a circumstance where there's a call for cost sharing or payment by the person who's making the request.
Right.
So, yeah, congratulations, Shuba. I think you've had effects that you haven't even recognized yet.
Yeah. And this is only the beginning.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, just to kind of to make it clear, wrap up a little bit about, give a little bit more flesh to what I'm writing. Patent litigation reform has been on the table for the last couple of years. There was a big change in patent law in 2011. Very important legislation that really changed the structure of patent law in the United States. And there have been a number of U.S. Supreme Court cases since then, one of them having to do with this idea of having the loser in a patent litigation pay the costs, not only their own costs, but also the costs of the prevailing party. And the theory behind that, more than bringing a lawsuit, especially a lawsuit that might be potentially frivolous, if there was the risk that the cost might shift to them if they lose. And so the standard for when the requirement of paying attorney's fees shifts to the loser has changed. There was a big Supreme Court case in 2014. There was a case from the Federal Circuit in 2005. And what basically I was doing during the year is compiling the cases and trying to get a sense of how that has affected actual decisions by lower court judges. And so the idea behind the report, as I'm formulating it, and hopefully Judge Fogel will be happy with it, or will answer some of his questions, or at least start the conversation moving so that I can improve it and expand on it, is what are the lessons to be learned? Can fee shifting be used as sort of a policy tool by district court judges to identify bad actors in patent litigation and somehow create correct incentives for when litigation should be brought? So that's, Joe, do you think that's a good description, or does it meet your expectations?
Oh, absolutely. It's what we expected. It's what we discussed, and I think that's what's going to be helpful. I should also mention there's one other service that Shuba provided. We don't have someone who's formally trained in economics on our staff. And from time to time, we'll do a research study, and some economic commentator will tear a giant hole in it. And it was very useful to go to Shuba and show him these reports and say, is this something we should take seriously? So again, something else that we were grateful for during your fellowship year.
Great. Thank you all. Shuba, did you have any other comments? Okay, at this point we are running out of time, and I think this was a wonderful conversation, and I hope all of you who are watching found the session to be useful. I want to wrap up by asking our panelists to quickly share some parting advice about the experience of being a faculty member and a mid-career applicant to the fellowship, and any comments about the other focus of our session, the Judicial Branch Fellowship in particular. So let me start with Joe. Any last words for our audience?
I would encourage the audience members to apply for a AAAS fellowship and a Judicial Branch Fellowship if they feel that's consistent with their academic goals. It's certainly a program they're going to be building over the years, and we're delighted to be able to participate in this program. And I just noticed that all four of us are wearing glasses. It's like the optics department from Sears advertisement.
Okay, Nancy?
Sure. First, I just want to encourage everyone out there who is thinking about it to absolutely apply. It's an extraordinary opportunity, and just kind of amazing to have it at a different stage of life than being younger. We'll say that. That was first. And the second is, if by chance there's any social scientists watching, I just want to say that in my agency, and I think lots of agencies, there's a real need for social science along with the hard sciences to look at the kinds of information and decision making that are so important for all kinds of policy. So a real plug for social scientists. And the third, I mentioned earlier, I had the good fortune of knowing a AAAS fellow alum. And if you, the fellowship emphasizes the importance of networking. If you do know someone, reach out to them. Or if you just know someone in DC, you know, take advantage of networking to learn more about what all this is about. But it's an amazing opportunity, so go for it.
All right, Shuba?
Yeah, I heartily recommend it. I remember when I saw the call, I guess it must have been in, boy, I guess 2013. I thought this is really a very, very exciting and unique opportunity, especially to launch a program with in the judiciary, which has largely been overlooked in this AAAS program. It's program I'm sure Sage has gone through the history, and I don't want to misrepresent the history. It's been around for a long time, at least 40 years, right? If I forget the exact number. And it's been really exciting. I guess a year ago I was in orientation, and I go back and look at my notes. I kept a little journal of notes for various events I attended, and it's just really interesting to go back and see, because the areas of law, science, and policy is something that is very much part of what I teach and write upon. And just to give you an example, unrelated to the report that Judge Fogel and Joe is waiting for, I'm working on a paper about universities and intellectual property policy and laws. And I think one of the interesting sessions we had a year ago was directly on the role of the university and the innovation ecosystem and the way in which Washington. So this has been really fascinating a year later to review that in this other piece of research I'm working on for a conference. So it's been really exciting, and I think whatever stage you're in, I think the Judicial Fellowship can work for lots of different people, whether they're just simply starting out or whether they want sort of a change of scenery or a change of focus in their work. I think it's very important. It's overlooked. I think some people maybe, I don't know if they view it as sort of a risk analysis. They may say, well, there's so many other fellowships in the other programs, but there's just simply one for the judiciary. But nonetheless, that's what makes it very exciting to apply for, because you do have that focus and can really be part of a team very quickly in terms of developing this new area. And so I've really enjoyed the experience. I found it very enriching, and I actually would like to apply for another. I assume I can't apply for the same one again, but I would like to look at other. I'd like to look at other AAAS fellowships down the road, especially the Jefferson Fellowship is really exciting. So I want to thank Sage and thank AAAS for giving me the opportunity, and Joe and the FJC, and I look forward to continuing the relationships and helping to build up the program, and but at some point in time I'll learn about time zones a little bit better too. So I apologize for that, but please feel free to contact me, Sage. You'll feel free to give my email and other contact information.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, as Nancy mentioned earlier, the AAAS fellowship class in any given year is very diverse and in a number of different ways, and that's very important to us. The one we're focusing on here is career stage, and it's a misconception, I think, that people often think the AAAS fellowship is for younger scientists and engineers fairly fresh out of their doctoral program. But as you can see, that is not the case. We do have people at all career stages. We actively recruit for them. We make visits to campuses and try to arrange sessions for faculty members, as well as PhD students and postdocs. And in fact, I am going to be at 3 universities next week, and I will be doing faculty sessions at all 3 of them. So if you are an academic and you're thinking about a really interesting, great way to do something different during a leave of absence or a sabbatical, please consider this. You won't regret it, as Nancy and Shuba have explained to you. And we hope to see your application, and please let us know if you have further questions about it. So with that, I thank you all for joining us and for submitting your questions. If we weren't able to get to your question today, please email us, and the email is fellowships@AAAS.org. You can find a list of upcoming chats in this series and on-demand links for archived chat sessions on the chat page of the Fellowship's website. As we said at the beginning, this is the 5th in the series this year. We will have one more on October 8th, last chat in this series, and we'll spend the entire time answering your questions about the fellowship program in general and the application process. And we've been doing chats, this is not the first year we've done them, so we have chats on various topics and with various fellows in our archives. As a reminder, the application deadline for the 2016-17 fellowship year is November 1st, so it's over a month away. Lots of time. Visit the Fellowship's website for information and details related to the application process. Thank you very much for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you.